Hi guys, and welcome to another Wargame Red Dragon tutorial with me, Bubblebox, and today we're going to have a look at the different infantry types and their transports, and then in the next video we'll move on and have a look in a bit more depth at the individual infantry units and the weapons that they hold and what they're best for and what they're not so good for. So the infantry in Wargame Red Dragon is divided into a number of categories, and each category can be identified in its background. Now there are a whole load, a gazillion infantry units, which can be very daunting if you're first starting to play the game, but you will get used to the different types, and there is a way to identify the different types by their background. So I'm going to turn them all off first, and we're going to have a look first at the ones that are used most, and it's the rifle infantry. Now the rifle infantry have this background here, this dark looking chap and this grey looking chap in the background, and these are all your rifle infantry. They are standard multi-role infantry, and they're capable of engaging the enemy infantry in and also armour if the armour's up fairly close as well, depending on the weaponry of the individual infantry squad. Then you've got your reserves. Now the reserves have the same type of background as the rifle infantry, but they tend to be like militia type infantry. They're a lot cheaper and a lot more plentiful, but far less powerful than your standard trained up riflemen. So they're really, the uses for these are not brilliant, but I'll talk about the uses for them. There are some uses for them when we talk about the individual types of riflemen in the next video. Now the next background is going to be your light infantry. Now don't let the word light put you off. These are very, very powerful squads, or they can be if used correctly, and they've all got this sort of mountainous type background overlaid by the unit and what it looks like. Now, the light infantry really are good at fighting both infantry and also at fighting armoured vehicles, again up close normally, but it depends on the weaponry that they actually contain, but they're pretty good at fighting armoured trucks, light tanks and infantry as well. So they're pretty good units. Get them up there maybe at the start of the game, and then they can be reinforced by heavier units later on. Then we've got the fire support units. Now they've got this strange sort of orangey browny kind of background, and these units are equipped with these strange looking sort of recoilless guns or recoilless cannons. They comprise of 5-man squads. They have decent but not brilliant anti-tank capability, nowhere near as good as the proper anti-tank infantry, and sort of an okay-ish anti-personnel fighting capability against other infantry, but not brilliant at either job. I don't tend to like these very much. I prefer my infantry unit to be good at one job rather than be okay at a couple of jobs. Then we've got the engineers, often called the sappers, and they've got this sort of bright, sort of orangey, sort of flamey type background for a reason. They have no machine gun, first of all, so they haven't got really a secondary weapon apart from, or anti-tank weapon either, but they do have these incendiary weapons which will fire sort of incendiary bombs or flamethrowers as well, and they're particularly effective against other infantry, especially in buildings and up close in forests as well. And as I said, they've all got this sort of flaming kind of background, so you can identify those types of units. Then you've got your commandos, and the commandos all have these red for danger, I would say, because some of these are very, very powerful units, and they have this dark red background. These really are your elite forces, things like the SAS, the Royal Marines, the Commandos, really strong, the Commandos, and all the other Delta Force as well. They've got a number of roles they can do. They're really good at sort of sneaking around, getting behind enemy lines. They're very fast. They can move quite fast across the map. even without transports. They can be dropped off and then they can sort of romp quite quickly across the map. They're very good against other infantry. They can also take out things like tanks if they can get close enough to the tanks, and the SAS can even take out choppers and take shots at aircraft as well. So they're very, very good. They are expensive, but they're very, very good at what they do. Then we've got the anti-tank anti-tank infantry. Generally, well, first of all, they have this sort of brownish type of background. They've all got this brownish type of background. They're generally a small group of just a couple of men, 2 men, and therefore very, very fragile. Won't take much to destroy these. They're equipped with a guided missile that's capable of engaging the enemy armor to a varying extent depending on the type of missile that they have, and I'll look at the different types of missile when I have a look at the different infantry units in the next video. And finally, we've got the anti-aircraft units. Now the anti-aircraft units have all got these sort of explosive background, sort of just the air with an explosion in, and they've all got that kind of background, so you can identify all the anti-aircraft units. Sometimes in game you'll see people refer to these as MANPADS, and that simply stands for Man Portable Air Defense System, but I just call them anti-air infantry really. Generally, again, small group of just a couple of guys normally, therefore again very fragile, easy to kill. They're equipped with guided missiles, capable of engaging helicopters. Certainly they can engage aircraft as well, although to a lesser extent, because their aircraft range is normally a little bit less than the helicopter range. All infantry squads are equipped with a personal weapon, which is normally the one on the left hand side. It's normally an assault rifle or a rifle of some sort. Sometimes they'll have a machine gun, which is normally put over on the right hand side over here, and it's normally 1 per squad. This is we've got one guy with a gun somewhere. This guy here at the front. He's also got the law as well, it looks like, and also a single heavy weapon, in this case the law, the light anti-tank weapon for the Fusiliers. This could be an anti-tank missile weapon, an anti-air missile, bazooka, a flamethrower, etc. Now all the infantry come in various levels of training. So if you have a look down here in the bottom, it says training, and for these Fusiliers it says regular, and it says there the better trained, the more damage they will deal with a given weapon. From lesser to better trained militia, then regular, then shock, then elite infantry. So if we have a look back at another look at the reserves, first of all, I think the reserves are pretty much, as you can see, militia, the most basically trained of your soldiers, therefore not as good and quite cheap. And then next up is the regular, and you'll find a lot of the riflemen. If we have a look at the rifle units, tend to be regulars. I think probably most of them are regulars, so they're regulars, yeah. And I think the light infantry tend to be regulars as well, so most of them will be regulars. Some of them are actually shock, so the Gurkhas are shock, whereas the Gornostrelki are regulars, so there's a bit of a mixture in there. The Highlanders are also regulars. I quite like the Gurkhas actually, I use them quite a lot in my decks. And then next up we've got the trained regular shock troops, and you'll find that the shock troops, as you've seen, we've just seen one of them, and up from the shock troops you've got the elite, and the elite of course tend to be your commandos, things like the SAS, Special Boat Squad, Commandos. These you will find will be mostly your elite infantry, the best trained, and so will do more damage per unit. Another thing worth noting at this point in the tutorial is that a lot of these infantry units come in different eras for the same type of unit, and what I'll show that with an example. If we look at these American light rifleman groups, you can see there's light rifleman and then there's light rifleman 90. So if I just pin the light rifleman and you have a look at their stats, you can see that they've got an M16, a machine gun, and this Dragon anti-tank weapon with a range of 1575 and an accuracy of 35. However, they've also got this upgraded Rifleman 90 with pretty much the same M16, the same machine gun, but an upgraded Dragon. This time the range has been increased, and also the accuracy and the AP power has also been increased on this weapon. So this is the older version basically with the older unit. This is the newer version with the newer unit. Of course the newer one costs 10 points more, it's more expensive. However, if you want to choose an era deck, so if you wanted a 1980s deck, then you would own type of deck whereby you get more availability, but you don't get the most up-to-date weapons. So you'd be able to get these ones that were made in the 1980s, but you wouldn't be able to get the 1990 type of weapon. And that goes for a lot of the infantry and a lot of the units in the game as well. Now, infantry always come with a transport that can be identified and checked out simply by moving the mouse pointer on its name. It's got the BTR-60B, that guy there, you've got the VTTs there, the North Koreans, I get them mixed up, yes, North Koreans. But for all the infantry, I've got transports, and the types of transports vary a lot, which means your infantry can be really flexible as to where they go and what they do. Now the first type of infantry, well there's four types of infantry transport vehicle really. You've got the armoured personnel carriers, the APCs, the infantry vehicles, or infantry fighting vehicles I suppose you should call them, the IFVs. Then you've got the choppers, your helicopters, and then we mustn't forget the assault boats, which you can get in the marine decks for the infantry as well. And we'll start off having a look at the armoured personnel carriers. And examples of these, well, let's go back to the good old Brits, which I know lots about if I can find them. For the Brits, you've got the Saxon here. You've got the basic stalwart, first of all, with no weapon at all. Then you've got your Saxon with a little Browning machine gun there. French, for example, have got the VABs, so these guys here. So you've got a basic VAB there for 10 points with a little machine gun. Then you've got your VAB T20 there with a little auto cannon. The Russians have got things like, the Red 4 have got things like the BTRs. So you've got the BTR-6 is probably a good example of an armoured personnel carrier if I can find the BTR. So the BTR-60 series, for example, for the Russians, and we've got the SPZs, yeah, the SPs, or the SPWs as well for the East German decks as well. And there's a big variety of these armoured personnel carriers. Now these armoured personnel carriers are generally pretty lightly armoured. You can't pin them and have a look at the stats. You can just sort of scroll over them in the deck system, but you can see they're fairly lightly armoured troop carriers, and they're generally armed with a machine gun of some sort, although some of the more expensive ones have the autocannons like some of the VABs and or even anti-tank gun weapons and even anti-air weapons as well on some of them. Now they cost between 5 and 20 points. They shouldn't be expected to take on heavy fire, but just to get your infantry into position, really, into a position where they need to be, where they can be dropped off with a small degree of protection from their armoured vehicle. The wheeled ones tend to be faster on the road than track ones, and the track ones tend to be a little bit more efficient across the open ground or off-roading than the wheeled type armoured personnel carriers. Now the next type is really your infantry fighting vehicles. So these really are your armoured transports and fighting as well. These ones can take part in fighting, and really we're looking at things like, if I can find the Americans, like the Bradleys here. So they almost look like mini tanks, these Bradleys. Really nice weapon. They are quite expensive. They can get to be quite expensive. These Bradleys are, well, in fact that one's only, they've gone down a bit since Airland Battle. In fact they're only 25, but they go up sort of in range there. You've got one at 30 and you've got one at 35, for example. You've got the Marders for the West Germans. They're also a popular choice, if I can have a quick look at those. So we've got the Marder 1 with an autocannon. Then you've got the Marder 1A1 with an autocannon and an ATGM Milan F1 weapon. Then you've got the Marder A2 with slightly upgraded autocannon. Then you've got the Marder 1A3 with an upgraded anti-tank Milan F2 weapon. A couple more examples for the Russians. You've got the BMP-3s, if I can find those. They're quite a decent sort of infantry fighting vehicle. They've got a nice anti-tank missile, actually, in fact with a nice range of 2,806 of those guys, 50% accuracy, AP power 21, pretty awesome weapon. Not brilliantly armoured, but okay for an infantry fighting vehicle. It's also got a main gun there and a machine gun on it, a main gun there and a sort of a small cannon as well that can also shoot at helicopters. Got the VTTs at the top. This is an interesting one as well, just as one last example. These VTTs for the North Koreans. This one's got a nice little autocannon that can shoot at choppers at close range. But then we've got these VTT 323s with an ATGM and a little autocannon. And then we've got these guys here, which actually have anti-air capabilities with Fire and Forget Strela 2M missiles. Quite a nice addition to the game there for the North Korean squads. So they've got some anti-air protection as they get themselves to the front line. So very, very useful indeed. Now these infantry fighting vehicles do have decent, if not top-end armour, most of them sort of a little bit of armour to protect themselves, but they do have good weaponry such as the autocannons, ATGMs, and some of them even the AA like these North Korean guys here. However, they can be fairly expensive, normally a little bit more expensive than the armoured personnel carriers. And also don't get too carried away with getting your infantry in the more expensive types of infantry fighting vehicles. Do get some cheap infantry, some infantry in cheap trucks as well, otherwise you'll find out your points running out and you won't have enough infantry to cover the areas that you need to cover on the map. So moving on to the transport helicopters. The transport helicopters are fast, very fast, they're lightly armoured, and as such they're very vulnerable as well. Generally Blue 4 choppers are very lightly armed as well, they're quite cheap, and the Red 4 ones are better armed but much more expensive. And in fact the Red 4 ones are some of them are pretty much attack choppers in their own right. What they're used for, they're best used really to get your infantry to rapidly seize urban zones at the start of a game, and to get infantry to the flanks or even behind enemy lines. Some of the Red 4 choppers are, as I said, are extremely well armed and are almost attack choppers. And one of my favourites, in fact, is the Polish Mi-24D here. 55 points, yes. But you can get a group of decent sort of infantry that comes with other types of infantry as well, not just these napalm type infantry. You get a decent set of infantry up to the front line, and then you've got a nice attack chopper to use as well. Again though, be careful, you bring in some into your, at least have in your deck some infantry units in cheaper transports as well, because you're not going to, if every time you bring an infantry squad in it's going to cost you an extra 55 points, you're still going to be having too many choppers and not enough infantry on the map, which would really be the wrong way around. Now one other thing worth mentioning here is that the choice of infantry transport is limited. For example, you can see with the Brits here, if you wanted to get some Fusiliers in a Lynx A87 with its really useful rocket pod, there's only 3 of these Lynx A87s, so I could click on that, get myself 12 of those guys in Lynx A87s, but then you can see my choice now goes down. I can have another 2 of those if I want, but my choice of Lynx A87 goes down to 2 as well. However, these Lynx A87s goes for any of the other types of unit you want as well. So if I, for example, went to logistics and I wanted to get one of these command units in a Lynx A87 as well, and got one of those guys, Then if we go back to the infantry and have a look back at our Lynx A87s with our Fusiliers, we can only have one more of those guys left. Sorry, one more of those guys left. We're looking at the 90s here as well. And then, for example, if I wanted to have maybe one of the earlier types, slightly cheaper one with a slightly less upgraded armor, I could grab one of those as well, get 12 of those trained. But then I can't have any more Lynx A87s now. If I want more infantry and choppers, I'd have to go to the Lynx AH1 with its machine gun, not a rocket pod. Now at this point I want to point out also I much prefer choppers with rocket pods, miniguns, a rocket pod at the minimum, and a minigun or some sort of auto cannon, which a lot of the Red 4 have, or a lot of the Red 4, to be honest, have better weaponry than the Blue 4 transport choppers anyway. But as far as the Blue 4 choppers are concerned, I like to have them with a decent-ish weapon that you can use against transports. You can't use against vehicles rather. You can't use machine guns against vehicles, but you can use rocket pods, miniguns, anti-tank weapons, autocannons, things like that against transports to stun them and sometimes even to kill them if you've got enough shooting at them. So they are really used whole game, whereas machine guns not very useful except against infantry, and even then you've got to be quite up close. So I'm prepared to spend an extra 10 points or so to get a better a better armed chopper personally. Again, it's a personal choice for me. I prefer to do that. You might want to get more of a cheaper one and save your points a little bit. It's entirely up to you. And exactly the same goes for the armoured vehicles as well. So if I've got a set of these VDVs, for example, into the deck, the number of BMD2s that I could get goes down to 2 as well. And if I got one of the VDV90s, then I can only have one more of those. So it works in exactly the same way for the choppers as it does for the armoured vehicles, the infantry fighting vehicles as well. Now I want to move on and finally have a look at another type of transport, which is the sea transport. So if you go to the naval part of the deck, and we'll just put it onto infantry rifle. So we'll get rid of those, put it onto infantry rifle. And you can see in this section, in the naval part of the deck, you can get infantry as well. And you can see they've got 3 numbers. So this one, for example, the Canadian Airborne in the Bison, you've got 20 plus 10 plus 5. 20 is the cost of the infantry, 10 is the cost of the Bison transport, and the last one, the 5, is the cost of the landing boat that you can go in. So that's why there's 3 numbers there. And these landing boats also offer you a little bit of protection, especially against helicopters. They've got these little guns. Now unfortunately, and I don't know why, you can't see these in the deck system. I don't know whether Eugen just didn't have time to sort of put this into the game or what, but you can only see these in game. So this is what these landing craft actually look like. And as you can see, this Red 4 transport boat actually has rocket pods and also a little machine gun that can shoot ground units, helicopters, and even aeroplanes that approach it. And you can see it moves along quite nicely at a reasonable pace. Not sure what the speed is. Maybe we can just get a look at that as well. So the speed 20, so not too shabby at all. And you can see when it unloads, you can see its transports, the BTR, and then when it unloads its units, it's got a load of rifle infantry in there that can then move ahead and do whatever they want. And once they've done the business, they can actually jump back into their transports if that's required. And also you've got these Yuong transport boats that you can use during the game as well. So guys, that's about it for this tutorial, and in the next tutorial we're going to be looking a little bit more specifically at some of the types of infantry unit, what they can be used for, what they shouldn't be used for, where on the map to use them, stuff like that. So please do comment, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.